you are.
I got tons of soul on my true collectible. Famous, so famous, number one, desirable. I do what I want, when I want, and how I want it. Leave you with the one in the air, that's how I roll. I got tons of soul on my true collectible. Famous, so famous, number one, desirable. I do what I want, when I want, and how I want it. Leave you with the one in the air, that's how I roll. I got change to throw, I don't care about no gold. Better, so much better, flipping, incredible. Always on the show, so they know that I still got it. And I never feel sorry, yeah, top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world. Top of the world. Yeah, top of the world. When I hear him come like my fuse and then ba-bum. Later, see you later, I'm about to blow this up. You can sing my song if you want, I know you want it. It's always kinda funny, yeah, cause you all know I'm a superstar in the sky to leave you on. Haters gonna hate, it's a proof of how they love.
Hey guys, I'm Si. Welcome to Ace Podcast Nation, the home of our originally created series, My Story. This is now our third series, and as I said before, I love this series because just get to speak to people from all different industries and careers and hear their story, because no matter who they are, where they're from, everybody's got a story. As you know now, Ace Podcast Nation, home to many great shows, original series, both live and recorded, featuring top guests, expert analysts and more. So please give us a follow on social media, subscribe to that YouTube channel, click the bell for notifications. And if you want some extra content, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/acepodcastnation. And if you prefer your podcast in audio format, then you can find all of our content at the Sports Social Podcast Network, the UK's first all sports podcast network, and you'll find them. And they do lots of other different shows, whether it's daily Premier League podcasts, wrestling, MMA, boxing, all sorts of good stuff. By the way, all of which I do or we do, so you can check them out here first. Check ours out first. They're the best. But joining me for this episode is a football writer, interviewer, podcaster, part of Beyond the Pitch, our friends over there. And it is none other than Mr. Callum McFadden. How are you, my friend?
Hi, Simon. Doing well. Delighted to be joining you. You've had some incredible guests on the show. Johnny Owen was one that really springs to mind straight away. He's someone I've spoken to and I've got a lot of time for. So always enjoy listening to this series. So to actually be asked on is incredible.
Thank you, mate. Yeah, Johnny's great. I got a lot of time for Johnny. He obviously he's from up my neck of the woods. So I've been lucky enough to have him on a couple of times for a chat, even though he's a very busy man. But he obviously made a couple of incredible football documentaries as well in the last 10 years or so, whether it was the one on Wales or the one on the Nottingham Forest managers. Some really good stuff. So people should actually check them out on give that a little plug on Amazon Prime. I think they are now, and I think one of them's on Netflix as well. But what we like to do on this episode, mate, is it's a lot of talking for you. And we're just basically going to hear a lot about you, but that's good. But what we do is take you right back to the beginning and kind of give us a little insight into your sort of your upbringing. Where did it all begin for Callum McFadden, mate?
So I was born in Greenock in Inverclyde, so the west coast of Scotland, about 25 miles outside of Glasgow down the coast. So that's where it started. And in terms of football and passion for the game, that started at a really young age. I was always kicking a ball around the house or playing in the garden, playing in the street. And I was that era. Obviously, I was born in the 90s where when I went to school, it was the very early 2000s. So before YouTube and all that sort of thing had sort of became massive. So probably one of the last generations that would run home from school, drop a bag in, and then luckily where I lived originally, it was close to a park which had 2 football goals. It was obviously steel fences around it. The nets were pretty old school. It was like rope with like metal and like held it together as such. So it was, you were never smashing that net or breaking through it. So it was always good. And my earliest memories are obviously, as I say, playing football in my local area. And my upbringing, as you can see, the Larson shirt behind me. My mum's side of the family, all Celtic daft, still are to this day. My dad's side of the family, Rangers daft. My mum and dad split when I was 2, which meant that because I grew up on the Celtic side, Celtic was always the club that I was destined to support, just from birth, really, when they'd split up. So Celtic is my club. However, my dad and I, my dad would take me to Greenock Morton games because obviously he wouldn't take me to Celtic Park or Ibrox. So Morton's a local club in the area, and we used to go there. My dad unfortunately passed away when I was 14, but we had some great memories watching Morton at Capello and Scotland games because, as I say, we stayed well clear of both Glasgow clubs for obvious reasons.
That's good. I mean, I'm sure there's some dads out there who would have tried to make you go to Ibrox to try and turn you, but sounds like some really nice memories, mate. And like you said, like that generation of being able to go outside and go and play football all day, and kind of your mum come and get you for tea. I talk about it a lot on some of my other shows. Like, I feel like I got 3 teenagers now. Like, the youngest has just turned 13, and they're all the oldest and the youngest are both football mad. The middle one's not so bothered, but like, I do feel like they've missed out a bit. Partially, obviously the last couple of years have been different anyway, but just generally, I feel like they've missed out because of things like devices and phones and YouTube and whatever. And I think, like, as a parent, I'm a bit guilty of that as well, because sometimes it is easier for them to be playing on the Xbox or to be on their tablet or whatever, whatever it may be, because I can be doing something else, which, is not ideal. But I used to love just going out from 8 o'clock in the morning, come back at, have breakfast, go out, start playing football, cricket, whatever, and stay out all day. And then my mother would be at the park, why aren't you home for tea? Or it's getting dark or something. They were good memories. And I think kids these days maybe have lost that a little bit because parents are scared of what's hanging around the streets, whether it's older kids or whether it's ropey, weird men. It's like, I'm sure all those things were there when we were younger, or when I was younger, and when you were younger. Different generations. I'm a bit older, but like those things that that I worry about as a parent, they were there. I just think they weren't as perhaps in your face. We didn't know about them as much. Maybe, I don't know, but it's a weird thing. But yeah, I do think kids have missed out a little bit. It's unfortunate, but you didn't. So as I rambled on then, but I was reminiscing about my own childhood. So, like, you mentioned where you could have Greenock and that. I was not really familiar with Scotland. My friend Kev McNaughton, obviously he lives up by Dundee way. Is that anywhere close to kind of where you are?
So Kevin's based on the East Coast, so I'm the West Coast, so obviously Glasgow, right down to Greenock, and then if you keep going down, you get down to Ayrshire. Whereas obviously on the East Coast, you've got Edinburgh through to Dundee, Perth, and then if you keep going, obviously up to Aberdeen. So he's based in the East Coast, but I've been through there a few times, a few friends from there as well, a few fellow football writers, Dave Smith, Grant Campbell, John Bleasdale as well, and they're very familiar with those sorts of areas. So I've been through there a few times, although not an expert myself, to be honest.
Well, my regular viewers of the channel will know my geography is notoriously bad, even for my local areas. So Scotland and places like that is even worse. So you enjoyed playing football as a kid. Was there any other sports that you were kind of good at?
I loved playing tennis. Obviously, the generation of mine was when Andy Murray started coming through. So he won Wimbledon as I was coming towards the end of my time in secondary school, but just that created a buzz, as you can imagine, in Scotland for tennis. And the only thing is, you could only play it in the summer. There was a bowling club down in Gourock, which had sort of gravel and tennis courts. So they weren't the best in the world, but during the summer on a sunny day, it was great to be able to just go there. So local sports shop in the town at the time, JJB, obviously not there anymore for obvious reasons. buying, I think it was like a Slazenger or a Wilson tennis racket for about $12.99, and then a couple of pals who played football and football teams. Obviously, the summer we didn't have games. We would change it up a wee bit, and tennis seemed to be the sort of summer sport that we would play. But in terms of others, always loved Formula One from a young age. Obviously, just watching it. Golf's another sport that I've always really enjoyed, although I'm rubbish at it, and watching is the key thing. But in terms of playing as a kid, football's always been massive in every aspect. Watching it, playing it, video games a lot, and then tennis was the other sport that I really absolutely loved playing. And when I was going through school as well, particularly primary, I was involved in sort of cross country athletics, but was never ever going to go on and be able to do that to any standard. That was purely enjoyment. And obviously, I think the class I was in primary school, I think maybe had 10 boys in it. It was majority girls, the class that we had. So when the cross country team came up, there was a fair chance you would get a shot at some point throughout the year.
Got you. So I'm interested. Like I used to play a lot of cricket as a teenager and as a kid. Do they play much cricket in Scotland? I know they got a team now, Scottish team, which has actually improved massively over the last couple of years. But is cricket something which was about when you were sort of growing up and teenager, or is it like non-existent?
I'll be honest and say non-existent. There is a cricket club in Greenock, to be honest with you, but genuinely, other than going there, they host sports days. So I've got nieces and nephews, and when their sports days were on at the schools and nurseries they were at, that's where it would be based because of the area it's in. And I would go there and watch that, but I can honestly say I've never been there to play cricket or watch cricket. Rounders, obviously, and games like that were a big thing in PE going through school, but in terms of non-stop cricket as well, of course, but in terms of traditional cricket, it's not something that was ever a big part of childhood up here. It's something that I do have a bit of awareness of, obviously as I've grown up. I've spoken to Ryan Sidebottom, for instance, obviously former England international, and it's something that I'm aware of, but I don't have any great knowledge by any means.
What's non-stop cricket?
So non-stop cricket, basically, it was a game we played in PE where essentially, I suppose, it's just cricket, but obviously you've got your stumps facing on obviously to where the bowler is, and then your runs are either side, right and left. Then the whole point of it was, if I was up batting and you were bowling, I would hit my shot and then I would go running, obviously, to get as many runs as I could. But as soon as the ball comes back to use the bowler, then you just bowl straight away, whether I'm there or not, to try and get me out, and then you just switch around, obviously, the team. So the aspect was just obviously basically non-stop, just meant very little breaks, just keep going and going and going. And if you risk runs and the bowler gets it, then they can just get you straight away.
Excellent. That sounds like a lot of fun, I've got to say. I wish they'd played that in my school. Excuse me, you'll have to excuse it if I start coughing madly. Since I had COVID, didn't I? It must have been about a month now. But ever since, I've just had this weird cough, which I just can't get rid of. And it's not like I don't know. It's not like it's like a really bad cough or anything. It's just there, and it's quite frustrating. And it seems to really, as soon as I start talking for any length of time, that's when I start coughing, which is always handy when you're recording like numerous podcasts a week. That as soon as you start talking, you start coughing. And of course, if you're in person or anywhere in public at the moment and you start coughing, everyone just looks at you like you've got the plague. But there we go. So what about academically in school? Were you quite academic? Like a lot of the people who I speak to, particularly athletes, but a lot of people who just generally have an interest or were good at sport as a kid, sometimes neglected their studies a little bit because they were more interested in, playing football or rugby or, whatever it may be. Like, were you quite academically minded as well?
Yeah, so for my sins, I quite like and I'm interested by politics. So modern studies and history were subjects that in school I absolutely loved, and my interest for those kind of helped spark interest in things like English. So when I left secondary up here, obviously it's hires, and my hires were all A's and B's. The only hire that I didn't pass, unfortunately, was physics. And that's something that a few of my pals still laugh at me for now. I got a D in physics. I got A's and B's in all the other subjects. However, physics was one that I got at standard grade level in fourth year, but I took it on at hire, and to be fair, it was ambitious. It would be like a Premier League club hiring a Sunday League team as a manager. He'll probably give it a right good go, but he's probably never really going to succeed.
Probably not going to go well.
I would say more in terms of academic study. I've always been better at English-based things rather than maths-based things, but I do really like maths. It's just when it gets into all those graphs and parabolas and all that kind of stuff, that's above my station. Perpendicular lines, I leave that stuff to. I've got a few pals that are engineers. I leave that stuff to them, and that's their station, not mine.
Yeah, 100%. You lose me straight away when you start going down that route. I think my older boy is doing he's doing physics A level and all this sort of stuff, and I just look at some of the stuff he does, and I'm just like, I can't help you with that, mate. Sorry, and just kind of got to leave him to it. But funny enough, you mentioned history there. My youngest boy is literally made his GCSE choices yesterday, and to our surprise, he chose history just randomly, which when he explained it, we kind of got it, but we didn't really expect him to pick it. But it's supposed to be quite interesting, and I think that's all you can do because like they're asking. When I made my choices, for instance, for my GCSEs, I was sort of 14, 15. So you're a bit older and a bit more mature, a little bit. But he's like just turned 13. And I think it's a big ask to expect a 13-year-old to know what job they want to do and what qualifications they want to go for. It's impossible. So we kind of stuck with go with what you enjoy and what you're good at, and then go from there. Because I think generally, as a rule, for that sort of stuff, that'll work out pretty well because you're more likely to excel at the stuff that you enjoy. And if you're good at it, then that helps too. But in terms of like writing about football, I'm kind of interested when that began, because when I was must have been about 10, and it was raining, so I couldn't go out and all this. And I was football mad. And my dad sort of just said, if you want to be a football journalist when you're older, then you'll need to, or a football commentator or whatever, you'll need to be able to make notes in the game. And I think he just wanted to keep me entertained for 90 minutes or whatever. And so he put the football on and he gave me like a notepad, and he sort of just said, right, make some notes and then write out what about the game or whatever afterwards, which I did. Gullible 10-year-old, see. But I kind of interested where your interest in writing about football became a thing. Did it start as a hobby or?
Absolutely. In terms of football, we recorded a school DVD when I was in primary 7. So what would that have been? So in 2007, so I'd have been about 10, 11 years old. And in that, they ask you, what job do you want to do when you're older? And my answer straight away, again, it's funny, but my mum watches it back and just laughs. I say right away, without any hesitation, I would love to be a commentator on Match of the Day or Sky Sports. And football has always been something that, as I say, it's a massive part of my life. And when the lockdowns and things came around, some people just say, it's just a game, there's other things to do, you can watch stuff on Netflix, etc., etc. And yes, of course you can, but it's the social aspect, it's getting on the bus, going to a game, the atmosphere, etc. So I've always been fascinated with that from a young age. And although my mum and dad had split, I've had a few male cousins who we didn't have Sky Sports, for instance, for a large part when I was really young growing up. So I had a cousin who lived in Guruk, and I would go down there and watch Super Sunday. And because they're older than me, I mean, they're late 30s, I'm in my mid-20s. So when I was going down there as a wee boy, they were mid-20s. So I was fascinated with the discussions that they were having. It was in and around the time where, for instance, Sven-Göran Eriksson was at Man City, so they were signing players like Robinho, Alano, and guys like this. One of my cousins is a Newcastle fan, so he was obviously telling me about Newcastle, and around that time, if I think rightly, the likes of like Nicky Butt, Alan Smith was there. Obviously, Andy Carroll comes through a few years later, so it was that kind of era, Colaccini, and I always remember that. So it's just always fascinated. In terms of writing about football, it's never something I really thought would happen. So when I left secondary school, I didn't go on and do academic study of journalism or football writing. I wanted to, but people had said to me, look, if you don't know anyone within the industry, it could be very difficult. You know, it could be something that you just don't get anywhere with, and essentially you'll have a degree, which is great, but you probably might need to go and do something else with it anyway. So I'm down a completely different route. And then just a couple of months before the first lockdown, I'd been speaking to Phil Brown, obviously a friend of the show, who does obviously work with BTP, and I work with him there, and Daniel G, sports lawyer down in England. And they always said that your passion for football has always been there. Why don't you do something with this? Because I think your passion will take you further than you think. And again, you kind of think, right, fine, okay, I'll see what I can do. So Daniel G said, write me an article on something to do with football and send me it before the end of the month. So being wanted to show a keen, I wrote something that afternoon and sent it to him straight away. And he encouraged me to then start my own blog, my own website, which I did. And then I found that the sort of podcasting route was good because I feel like at times I'm a more natural speaker than I'm a writer, but I do really enjoy writing, although it's something I really like to work at. So basically started my own platform in 2020, and then it grew very, very quickly, and started off speaking to guys that I knew. So for instance, Robbie Crawford, who used to be at Rangers, now playing in America. I worked with his brother in a previous job. So he'd said to me, look, Robbie will speak to you. He'll help you out as you're starting out. And to be fair, that was the best thing ever, really getting guys that I knew to start with, because it helped me get used to formulating questions. It helped me, as daft as it sounds, I always think the best part of interviewing is knowing how to really listen carefully. I know that sounds very basic, but it's about hearing a name or an experience that's mentioned and then giving a follow-up based on how closely you've been listening. So that was all very useful. It took off. The podcast started doing really well. And then I decided to close my own website down just because so much goes into that, as you know, in terms of time scale and stuff. And a few publishers had said, look, we'd be interested in publishing your work, and then joined World Football Index last summer. And then it's just continued on from there, really. And in the last couple of weeks, I've had other people reaching out saying, look, we like what you do. Would you like to have a chat with us, etc., etc. So basically, I'm just taking everything as it comes, and I'll never change the fact that I do this for the love of football. You know, I don't have any aspiration that it's going to become this full-time job and it's going to take over my life, etc. If something like that was to happen and it worked out for everybody in my life and whatever, yeah, of course, but it's not something that I wake up in the morning and seek out. I just absolutely love what I do. And as I say, the Larson shirt behind me, I've spoken to Henrik, and he was my hero as a kid, still my hero now. I met him last year, and I was a nervous wreck when I met him. And it's one of those where if I never do another interview ever again, Simon, I've spoken to my hero as a child. I've spoken to over 400 players, managers, people within the game. I'd be very happy with that. But the ambition and desire is always there to just keep going and seeing what else is there to achieve. Because whether someone's played in Premier League down south or National League or the top flight up here or the lower divisions up here, everybody, as you know, has got a very interesting story. And somebody might have played, 2 minutes for Celtic or Rangers, but they were still in that dressing room. They still maybe trained alongside some of those big stars. A big star might have drove them into training, and sometimes you hear some of the nicest and some of the funniest stories from these guys and women as well. So, no, as I say, always been passionate about football, always wanted to kind of express my opinions on football and have people listen or read, and luckily I've been able to do that. But as I say, if I stopped right now, I'd be delighted. I've achieved a lot of personal things that I never thought I would, as I say, speaking to Henrik and stuff. So for me, everything else is just an absolute bonus, and long may it continue.
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a couple of things I'd say from that as well. First of all, where you mentioned about you starting out and then you kind of rely on people you know, and that kind of resonates with me a lot, because that's what I did for quite a long time. I started off with people that I knew personally, and then you kind of move on to friends of friends and people who know someone, and you kind of just got to go from there. And like you, I kind of got things it started off for me was just trying to help my own mental health after I'd had a car accident and stuff. And I was just trying to find something to focus on and get my head straight, I suppose. and it kind of just grew and grew, and I was like, oh, okay, so this is going quite well. And then I ended up getting to speak to a load of Cardiff players who only a few years previous had been like, I'd been going to watch, like week in, week out. And like Andy Campbell he was like my hero. He'd scored this like huge famous goal. And then sort of before you knew it, we were very close friends. We were doing a regular show together, and it all became, it just, like you say, I think it helps as well. If you're passionate about what you're doing, it does make a very big difference, because it's not a chore to do it. And you're not like, oh, I've got to write this article, or I've got to do this, or I've got to do that. And I think when you've got something like that in your life, it's easy to be motivated in some ways to do it. And I think not that it's easy to do the work, but that you do, but I just mean it's easy to be motivated to do it, because you get to speak, like you said, you get to speak to your heroes, you get to speak to footballers, have conversations with interesting people. So it's, what's not to love about that? But I've got no doubt that it will continue to take you to many an interesting place, I think. And also, you mentioned Phil. Obviously, I cannot speak highly enough of Phil from on the pitch. Regular viewers will know him. He's been on a couple of times in various shows. But like, Phil helped me so much at the beginning of when I first started the channel and stuff like that. And just initially, I just reached out to him because I had come across a video about him talking about some stuff. It was a YouTube video that he had put up. I think it was probably a year or two previous, about what he had been through with his wife and stuff like that. And I had reached out to him then a couple of years later and said, "Oh, I've just come across this video. I kind of follow you on social media. I would really like to kind of speak to you about that and mental health and stuff like that." And I didn't expect him to reply, because he's got so many thousands of followers that I just thought he won't even see it. And he replied pretty quickly. And he came on and he gave me a load of his time. We recorded a couple of shows in the space of a week. But even since then, like, we've sort of built up a bit of a friendship, and I just cannot speak highly enough of the man. And when he brought you on board for the BTP shows, I thought that you joined him seamlessly, and I think they're still as good as they have been previously. They, if not maybe a little bit better. No disrespect to I've forgotten his name, the gent who was on before, but I think you and Phil have got a really good rapport. You get on well, and I think that is important when you're doing podcasting. You need that, because audience or listeners can see through it really, really, really quickly if you haven't got that rapport, or if anything which you're doing or saying is kind of got any sort of fakeness to it, I guess, is the best way. People see through that these days, because there's so much content everywhere. I think you kind of got to be yourself and have that rapport. Where do you kind of see, like, where do you see yourself going? Where do you think it will go? Should I say, not where you want it to go? Where do you think things will go for you in the near future?
Before I answer that, Simon, I just wanted to touch on the mental health aspect. I'm very honest and open about this, and you've seen it with shows with Phil and articles I've done. I suffer from depression. I lost my dad at 14, as we talked about. That affected me massively. So, as I said, my mum and dad split when I was 2. My dad came back into my life properly when I was about 8 or 9, going to see him regularly, going to the Morton games. Always remember, just a random memory, Chris Mackey, a guy who was a trialist for Alloa, scoring against Morton at Capello. I think Morton lost 1-0. Pouring the rain that day. Obviously, Alloa with the Wasp type shirts. Just a memory I can remember physically now, sitting there with my dad in that position at the right-hand side of the main stand, closest to the exit as you come in, and watching that game and thinking, wow, what typical we come and it's pouring the rain and losing the game and all that sort of stuff. But no, as I say, I'm honest and open about that. It's something that when I was younger at 14 and stuff, I must be honest, I didn't really, it sounds terrible, I didn't probably grieve when my dad passed away, because I was in secondary school, I had my exams coming up, then I had my higher exams, then I had my hires in 6th year, then I went to uni, then I finished uni, then I'm on to a job, and then constantly you're just looking at the next thing, the next thing. And for me, it was in 2019. I just completely had an absolute meltdown, a complete breakdown in the sense that everything that I enjoyed doing, didn't watch. And that's not me, as you know, football wasn't interested in watching it, wasn't interested in speaking about it, didn't want to get up in the morning, didn't want to leave the house, didn't want to be around anyone, wanted to sleep all day, didn't want to eat. And all these things that obviously I've got a fiance, we're getting married in 2023, and she was great with me. My mum was great with me, and they've always been the real rocks. I always say my fiance, my mum, and football are the three things that I need in life. My sister and my niece as well are the sort of 3-4 main things in my life that I know that I need to just. If I've got those things, I can conquer anything. I can do anything. And when I was going through that time in 2019, it was horrendous. It was I would say about 6 weeks of real darkness, I mean, only if you've been through it, which I know what we have, it's, you understand it. If people listening might think, well, maybe you were just feeling a bit fed up. Now, we can all have a day even now where you go, like yesterday, for instance, I thought, not having the best day, I just want to get home, watch the football Champions League on TV and go to bed and start again the next day. When you're going through a bout of that, it's not a day or a couple of hours, it's day after day, week after week. And I always say, when I'm out of it, now I'm in a good place, I can never imagine being back in it. But see, when I'm in that moment and I'm in that bout, I can never imagine escaping. It's as if you're completely trapped and there's fences and walls built around you. And so I managed to come through that 2019. Phil was a great help with that, to be fair, as well. Obviously spoke to a medical professional, went through CBT, which was very helpful for me. And then, funnily enough, last year, 2000, I had another breakdown, but it wasn't as big. And I said this to Phil at the time. Again, it sounds a bit maybe strange, people thinking about this, but the best thing that ever happened to me was accepting that I suffer from depression and accepting that that's a part of who I am, and that realistically I probably can't change that. So in 2009 it was a real shock, and how I was feeling and all, and you don't know how to sort of cope with it. Whereas when it came back in 2021, it was around August time. The weather was great and stuff, so it's not as if we were right into the despair that winter can sometimes bring with dark nights and all that sort of stuff. So basically, I could feel it coming. As daft as it sounds, I always feel physically it's like somebody's like pressing down on me. That's the way I feel. I feel really worn out. I feel really heavy. Everything's an effort. And I could sort of gradually feel that coming. I was able to be very proactive about it this time. I was able to put in place what I had to put in place. And after I would say 2.5 weeks, I was then able to start getting back to myself. And then within about another 2 weeks, probably about 4 weeks, I was back to feeling my best again. And the reason I mention this is, if you struggle with your mental health, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, whether it's both, whether it's another aspect, it won't work for everyone. As I say, there's no one size fits all or one magic miracle cure or method, or we'd all be happy every day, every minute, every day. But I found that for me, admitting and accepting that's part of who I am was the best thing for me, and it kind of empowered me in a sense, is that my friends know about it, my fiance knows about it, my mum knows about it, any colleagues that I work alongside know about it, and it's never, and I don't think it ever holds me back. The way I look at it now is I'll always give my absolute all, and if I'm unfortunate enough to go through a bout, then I just say, see, for the next 2-3 weeks, I can't do a thing for anyone or anything, not even myself. I just need to rest, recuperate, and let this bout pass. Now, as I say, I've only had 2 major bouts, I would say, in my life, 2019, 2021, but I like to think now that I'm in a position where I know when those symptoms are coming and that I can put something in place, as I was able to do last year. But to just go back to your question on terms of where I see myself going, I just want to address that first because I think it's important. I'll be honest with you, Simon, and say that I don't know. If you'd said to me when I started I would get to where I am now, I would have laughed at you and said, very good. Put down the glass of beer or a glass of wine, whatever it might be, and lay off that. You know, I never would have foreseen speaking to, as you mentioned, Cardiff being your club. For me, the Celtic team that got to Seville, I've spoken to Rab Douglas, Jackie McNamara, Paul Lambert, Stilian Petrov, John Hartson, Chris Sutton, Lubo Moravchik, Henrik Larsson. I've spoken to basically all but 2 members of that team. And that was the team when I was growing up. I still get the shirt that's around somewhere. When Celtic were in Seville, 2003, it's tiny, obviously, because I was only an 8-year-old at the time, born in '95. So I've still got that shirt, and it's tiny compared to obviously the size I'm now. And luckily, through the years, I've managed to get some of the players that played in that team to sign it and stuff. And I would never have foreseen that happening. And for me, I know it maybe sounds as if I'm not being ambitious or anything, but I'm delighted with all the progress I've made so far. And it sounds like a terrible football cliche answer. I just take it as it comes. And I know that sounds maybe boring, but I don't put any pressure on myself. I see this as a pleasure and a privilege, and wherever it goes is where it's meant to go. And if it ends tomorrow, then it ends tomorrow. And if I'm still doing it, pardon me, in 20 years' time, then great. And if it goes to even bigger success, great. But if it doesn't, then I can honestly look myself in the mirror and say, look, that wee boy sitting in that video and your school DVD that said he wanted to do this, that, and this, you've done all that and more in terms of how it's made you feel. So if you don't get any other opportunities, then good luck to whoever does, because you've done well.
Yeah, spot on, mate. I think there's quite a few correlations between myself and you. Just there's a few years between us in age. Like, so my father died when I was 16, and much the same as you, I kind of did not deal with it at all. I had a little brother who was 4 or 5 years, or 4 years younger than me. So like I was more concerned with if he was all right and if my mum was all right and this, that, and the other. And I had GCSEs coming up and stuff. And then as the years go by, like you said, there's always kind of, you move on to the next thing, or you've got to do this, or you've got to do that, got to get a job, got to go to work, got to whatever. And I kind of never dealt with it. And then all of a sudden, it kind of just all kind of caught up with me and hit me. And like I used to drink a lot as well at that point, especially in my sort of early 20s, which at the time I didn't realize, but a lot of that was to do with not kind of grieving and not dealing with it. And then eventually you just kind of, your mind can't just keep going and going. And I think one of the things I've learned since I've been doing podcasting, particularly when I've tried to maybe take things on to the next level or push things along a bit and try and really make a concerted effort to grow stuff, is so like, and I was just, as you were saying it, I was just saying then about like, you know, what will happen and stuff. I was thinking, like, I've had times where I've probably pushed myself a bit too much and tried to do too much. And then I was just in the back of my head, I was thinking, yeah, you've got 2 podcasts today, 2 tomorrow. You got like 6 lined up next week. And I was thinking, yeah, Mike, I think I need a break after next week, because what I tend to do is I kind of build up. So I'll have my normal schedule, and then I'll be like, oh, I'd like to get some in the bank and do some more, and I'd like to do some in the studio, and then so the next week I'll do a bit more, and then the week after that and more, and then before you know it, by the 4th week, it's like I'm barely finding enough hours in the day to do everything. And then I really struggle then because of a combination of my physical health, my mental health, the stress of trying to do everything that you're trying to do. It kind of all catches up with you a little bit, and then I'll have a break and stuff like that. But I find it quite interesting because, like I said, there was a few kind of little correlations between, you know, what you've been through and what I've been through over the years. It's kind of one of those things. And I think the thing with depression and mental health generally, I would say, is you could feel like it's the best you've ever felt. You could feel happy. You could feel like you're super content. Your life is at like the best point it's ever been. But you're only like a day away from those kind of dark thoughts and having a bout of depression or whatever it may be, you know, whatever you kind of suffer with. Those things can happen at your best times as much as the worst times, or stressful times, like just because things are going well doesn't always mean that you won't get a bout of depression or you won't suffer with any mental health issues. And I think that has taken me a long time to realize, because I think particularly probably in the last 10 years or so, I'd say, other than when I had my car accident, which was quite a difficult and dark 5 years or so, like outside of that, a lot of my periods where I've had sort of dark thoughts or I've been struggling with my mental health, things have been going quite well. So it's not always like when things are going badly, or you haven't got a job, or you're struggling financially, or whatever it may be. It's not always that's when it's going to kind of hit you. And I think it seems like you've got quite a good sort of thought process with it, and a handle on, like, you can recognize the signs of when you're starting to feel a bit like that. And then I think what you said about just take yourself out of it completely for a week or two, it's a lot of the time that's the best way, as long as I think the main thing is not necessarily to isolate yourself from people, but like if you're able to take yourself out of stressful environments for a week or 2 weeks and just let your mind recover a little bit. And I think that's, like, for me personally, I was just thinking about the last week or two I've had and the next 2 weeks that I've got coming. And I was thinking, yeah, I think there's something to that I need to probably do that in a couple of weeks, just because probably been doing too much. But we won't tell my wife that, because she tells me that all the time, and we don't want her to think she's right.
Just on the point there about depression can come at you when you're feeling good. So the example I have of that was my partner and I, our first big holiday was to the Dominican Republic. So we graduated, settled into employment, and we went on a holiday to the Dominican Republic, all-inclusive 2 weeks, biggest holiday we'd ever been on. We'd saved hard to obviously get there. Now, you're going to a luxury resort for 2 weeks. To anyone, if I say that, you go, wow, that'll be brilliant. The first 3 days of that holiday, I felt incredibly depressed. And it was almost like imposter syndrome. It was almost as if there was something in my mind saying, you don't deserve to be here. And all those negative thoughts were just chipping away at me. And as I say, it took me, maybe it was just me being a bit unsettled. I was so far away from home, etc. I don't quite know. But it was the first 3 days I found where it was like everything was going on around me, the nice scenery, obviously all-inclusive, etc. And I wasn't really taking it in. It was as if I was planted there, but in my mind, I was just sitting on the couch at home going, this is boring. I don't feel great. I want to just go to bed. Whereas, luckily, it wasn't a long bout, and it went away, and I was able to then start enjoying the holiday and make some great memories. And obviously, been on holiday since, and I've never had those thoughts ever again. But when you said that there, I remember getting the flight, even just before, just feeling really panicky and nervous. And as I say, when I got there, just really down. Like, the sun's on my back, and normally that's something that really, really helps. I found that in the summer. I always find I'm at my best in the summer. I love sunshine. I love the weather. When it's content, you can go out a walk, you can go out a cycle, you can go a drive, whatever it might be. I always love that kind of time of year. But no, as you say, you don't choose when it comes, it chooses you. And as you say, you could be having the best week of your life Monday to Friday, and then Saturday morning those dark clouds are just there. And the hardest thing with it, as Simon, is when it comes over you in a period where you're feeling really good, you're looking in the mirror and you're going, why is this happening to me? And you're desperate to logicalize it and decompartmentalize it and really break it down, but you can't, because, well, I couldn't anyway when I initially went through 2019. After accepting it's part of who I am, when those dark clouds come now, as I just look and go, I need to take as much time out, whether I'm disappointing people or having to cancel events, it needs to be done. So, for example, last year, one of my best friends graduated, and I couldn't go to the celebration drinks or meal because I was going through a real bout again last year, and I felt incredibly guilty and awful. And at the time, it made me feel even worse because I was angry with how I was feeling that I couldn't be there. But after I felt better, we met up and I made good memories with him. And they understand, it's not something that I hide. And I was fully supported by my friends, my fiance, my family. Always have been, always will be. They're those kind of people. Thank God I'm lucky. I count my blessings for them. But yeah, as you say, it chooses you. You don't choose it. And there's so many people listening to this and we're thinking, I know what he means when you're looking in the mirror and you think, why me? Why is this happening to me? Couldn't it go somewhere else for the day? And you do, sometimes you think a wee bit selfishly and you think, why can it not go and hit somebody else today and give me a day off? But all we can do, I think, and this is why platforms like yourself, BTP and others are good, is guys like ourselves and women on these platforms speaking honestly and openly is so important, because we're all normal human beings. Even footballers and radio presenters, etc. Yes, they might have more wealth, but they probably still enjoy a bag of Walker's crisps and a can of ginger beer the same way we do, albeit they might have a nicer
100%.
car and a nicer house and go on a nicer holiday. But we all are the same people, I think. Obviously, there's maybe an elite 2 or 3%, your Jeff Bezoses and stuff of the world that are completely out there. But I think in the main, even people that have real notoriety and profile they're normal people. And I think the more we all speak about it, whether you've got a massive profile or a small profile, then it can only help. Because I think for me, speaking to guys like Phil, being aware of your story and others, it gives me hope that I can then speak out to you guys maybe at the time of how I'm feeling, but then now be in a position where I'm happy to speak about it openly. And when I initially went through it, there is a wee bit of embarrassment. I thought, wow, what will people think if I say this? And will people think, oh, he's a weirdo, he's mental, blah, all those kind of things that come into your head. But you get power from accepting it, and the reaction from the vast majority of people is positive, and it can only help, because the statistics for suicide for young males in the UK in particular is a disgrace. It's atrocious. There are many reasons for them. It's very easy to say about alcohol and drugs and cigarettes and all these negative influences, that it's very easy for politicians and people to just say, oh, that's why. But they don't think about support. I mean, the first time I went through about 12-week waiting list. If you're in a real deep, dark place, you might not be here in 12 weeks. That's got to change. And again, we could go on a whole show about that.
100%.
We definitely just need to keep spreading the message. And I think it's important that you're doing that, I'm doing it, and hopefully others continue to do it, because it's important that people realise there's always somebody or somewhere to turn, even when you might not think so. There always is.
Yeah, 100%. Now, we've done 3 or 2, I'm trying to think now, 2 series on mental health in sport. So the first one we did was like a slightly shorter one with a range of people. We did a sports psychologist, we had Willie Boland, we had my co-host for the later series, Jacob, on, who works within mental health and with football clubs specifically, and we had former Middlesbrough player Alan Moore on, talking about his issues with mental health and some of the stuff he had been through. But I was lucky enough in the second series, we did 10 episodes, and I was lucky enough to speak to all sorts of these different footballers, but not just to speak to them. It was purely about their battles and their journey with mental health. So you had like Keith Gillespie, who had obviously had issues with gambling that had led to some battles with depression. You had Andy had struggled when he'd come out of the game and really had some issues around sort of that side of thing. Then you had David Cottrell, who'd battled with alcohol and mental health problems. James Clark, who's a current Warsaw captain, came on and talked about he's had PTSD because he had an anaphylactic shock on the pitch, and he had kind of really struggled in the aftermath to that. Luke Chadwick came on and talked about how he'd been bullied and, by media, and not just kind of people on social media, but actual, supposed newspapers and journalists and broadcasters, some of the stuff that Luke had to put up with back in the day. And, it was just unreal, like really personal stuff. And I think that is problematic. We had Darren Williams, who talked about his battle with depression. Kev Twaddle, who you might be familiar with, he's based up in Scotland, had issues with gambling, depression, panic attacks. And then we finished off with former England international Chris Kirkland. But like what I found with that series is obviously that's one, it's a wide range of footballers from different levels. You just obviously start with Keith Gillespie, who's former Man United, Newcastle, Northern Ireland international, and we finish with Chris Kirkland, former England international. But we purposely kind of capped the series with those two, because then in between you had footballers from League One, a current footballer from League One, Kev Twaddle from predominantly Scottish football, Luke Chadwick, all different levels and different footballers, but all quite relatively well known for whatever reason, talking about how mental health has affected their life. So even though they had the money, their mental health had been affected by different things. And we had so many messages just from people saying, "Oh, I was having a bad day and like to see X, Y, and Z talking about this, or I'm going through this, or do you know what?" I had someone message me saying, "Do you know what? I've been gambling too much." And at that time, I had talked about I had a few issues with gambling, even quite recently, like in the sort of last 10 years. And then about a week later, we'd done the show with Keith Gillespie, and this person kind of messaged me and said, "Oh, look, I watched your two shows, and I think I've been gambling a bit too much, so I'm going to contact Gam Care tonight." And just those messages like that, they mean so much more than anything getting to speak to anybody, because ultimately when we're talking about mental health, whether it's from personal experience or you're interviewing someone about it or you're having a general discussion about it, you're looking to reach that one person who feels like they're on their own and they've got nowhere else to turn, because we've all been there in different different amounts. Some people have been there, like myself, who've been right on the brink of doing something disastrous and kind of come back from it, and others have just had those thoughts. Others have battled depression. There's so many. Everybody's been affected by mental health in some way. If it's not personally, it's someone they know, isn't it? And I think if you can reach that one person, then that's what you want to do.
Absolutely. And I think, as you say, the more we talk, the more awareness is out there, and hopefully people know that they can definitely turn to some one person that they trust or an organisation, because there are so many great ones out there.
100%, mate. So just for the kind of last sort of 10-15 minutes of the show, mate, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about a bit of everything, really. Some of the work you do. Do you know what? It's mad. When you Google you, so many different things come up, like in the Google search, just like different articles, LinkedIn, and obviously the Football Index. And so did you start with, I saw that there was a Greenock Telegraph article which you wrote. Let's have a look. Just talking about your launching your podcast, really, and also, excuse me, sorry. And I think you interviewed someone as well. Who was it? Let's have a look.
Christian Naddy.
Yes, that's the one. So like you're in a short space of time, your work has kind of spoken for itself, really, because you can, not everyone can Google their name and find numerous pieces of work and content and things like this. So I think, how does it feel when you do that? Like, because it's a bit of a weird thing, isn't it, to Google yourself and see newspaper articles about you or written by you and stuff like that.
It's one of those where initially when these things start, you do find it strange because it's not necessarily the norm. But I think you do get used to it in time. So I remember Alistair Campbell, when I interviewed him, I remember the night before, he was the first person that I felt was really known pretty much across the UK and probably even in Europe. And I remember being really nervous, thinking, what if he doesn't like me? What if he thinks my questions are rubbish? What if I come across and I'm really nervous and it's obvious? But that interview went really well. And after that, I said to myself, look, if it can go really well with someone as high profile as that, you can do any interview and just be yourself. And that's the way I've always approached it since then. So I try not to think too much about that kind of side of it, because I think if I was, it might throw me, and it might make me think, oh, right, well, I maybe need to be more careful, and maybe need to make sure it's worded perfectly so that it doesn't get picked up, or blah, blah, blah. But as I say, basically, I try and be myself and just take it in my stride. And as you say, it's nice that articles and things appear, but I never get complacent. I always say, whether it's Henrik Larsson I'm speaking to or a League Two player in Scotland, every person gets the same respect, the same amount of research, the same dedication to it. And you see that with the World Football Index pieces. I've got Ron Atkinson, Norman Whiteside on there, but I've also got Peter Weatherson, who was a hero at Morton, who, as I say, my dad and I watched when we went there. And yes, he might not be high profile compared to Ron Atkinson, Norman Whiteside and others, but his interview was still thoroughly researched, and I gave him the time to open up and speak about his career, and gave him the respect that, yes, it might be a majority championship in Scotland, but to me, that's no difference, whether it's Premier League in England or, as I say, championship or whatever up here. I'm just grateful for any interview that I'm lucky enough to conduct, and always make sure that I do the same amount of preparation, because at the end of the day, if you don't put the same amount of preparation into one guest because they're a certain level, people see through that right away. And then even higher up the food chain, I mean, you could say people will go, well, he didn't put a lot of effort into those two, so why is he now doing it for me? So, as I say, for me, the blanket approach is give everyone the same amount of respect and do the best job, whether it's Championship or Premier League or whatever.
Yeah, 100%. When I first started doing podcasts, I'd get really nervous, like struggling just with nerves, and whoever it was with, just general nerves. And it took me a bit of time just to be able to get my head around what I wanted the channel to be, in terms of, I just wanted it to be natural conversations with whoever is the guest, whether it's Cristiano Ronaldo or it's Joe Bloggs from round the corner. I wanted it to be the same as best it could be to whoever I was talking about, just be conversations. And once I kind of got past that aspect of things, I think I kind of like found it easier just for myself to be able to come on and just be myself, because I felt like I was very almost robotic at the start, because I was almost like trying to plan out every aspect of the show, like every question and every little bit, which of course, as you know, you can't always do that, especially if you're having a conversation, because things, you detour, like we just detoured into kind of mental health and everything like that. Like, that's what I want, is conversations, but conversations don't follow a format of kind of question, answer. It just doesn't work like that. So I think there's that sort of side of things. Did I see something recently that I was just having a quick look. Did I see something that you're going to be interviewing a certain Mr. Wayne Rooney soon? Did I see that somewhere?
I'm going down, so there's a dinner in Manchester at the end of March. So I'm going down there. Whether I'll get the chance to speak to him for any period of time, I'm not quite sure. That's still something that maybe I need to work on. But no, definitely going down there, and it'll be great to have a chance to definitely meet him. I know that's happening for sure. Whether I can get a few words, I don't quite know. But if I can, then obviously I'd be over the moon, because for me, I mean, I know his documentary's now on Amazon. A phenomenal footballer who I think won't be fully appreciated. I know he's retired now, but I think he'll be. I think the longer it goes on since he's retired, he'll be even more appreciated, because when you look back at the impact he had at such a young age for England, for Everton, for Manchester United, and even the impact he's having now at Derby, he could easily have been desperate for that Everton job, but he turned down the approach to stay at Derby to see what he could do until the end of the season, given the circumstance. So, as I say, I love him as a player. I think he's doing well as a manager, and he's definitely someone who I loved watching growing up. And as I say, it'd be great to meet him. And if I could ask him even just one question, I would be absolutely over the moon.
Yeah, me and Rodri have been talking about it a lot lately. We are under the impression, we think that if he keeps Derby up, it automatically makes him the manager of the year anyway. But also we argued that it would be one of the greatest greatest escapes by a manager ever in any league, because to have 22-point deduction and get out and not get relegated is simply incredible when you think how small the squad was, how they didn't have any money to spend, and he's had to do a bit of wheeling and dealing, and he's only, it's his first managerial job. Yes, of course, he's got contacts from his playing career, but he hasn't got the managerial contacts, shall we say, with the executives and stuff to do the wheeling and dealing, if that makes sense. So I think he's done such a phenomenal job. And I agree with you. I don't think he'll be truly appreciated until he completely retires from football. And then people will be like, oh yeah, Wayne Rooney, what a player, what a manager, what a mind. Even now, people do not appreciate how good a footballer Wayne Rooney was. And I find it mind-blowing as a Welshman as well. Like, people just don't. And like, I see some people say, oh, he's overrated. That overhead kick he scored against Man City came off his shin. And I was like, it was in the 89th minute at Old Trafford. It's like, not many players are capable of doing that. Yeah, frustrating to say the least. So I wanted to show you a photo and ask you to explain it to me, which I found on your Twitter page earlier. So don't worry, it's not like I haven't found some photo on the deepest, darkest realms of the internet. It was something that you put up on Twitter the other day. It might have even been today, actually. But we'll ask you to explain it anyway. So I'm going to just pop it up on the screen for the viewers to have a little look. So for the audio viewers, I shall explain. This is a little boy, and he seems to be. He's got a black, I would assume, Manchester United top on, which says Ronaldo. Little blonde boy, and he seems to be taking a pee on a motor vehicle. So we'll let Callum explain this photograph in more detail.
So there's a picture of me standing. Now that you've said that, I actually can see how it looks. That's actually one of my uncle's car. My Uncle Alec. Okay. He's a lot older now. He's in his 80s now, actually. And I got that top, so that's 2004. So I was 8 at the time. I think it's 2004-5 season, whatever it may be, but it was that kind of time scale. So I got that. I basically made my first Holy Communion, and one of the gifts that I got was from my Auntie Betty and my Uncle Alec, was the black Manchester United shirt with Ronaldo in the back. Now, the reason it doesn't have the number 7 on it is because the local shop, as I mentioned earlier, JJB's it was at the time, or JJB, however you want to pronounce it, didn't have any number 7s left. So I just had Ronaldo's name in the back. I got a picture. So there's a picture of me and my uncle standing face on with that picture. And then I asked them, because again, daft football loving wee boy said, I want a picture to show people the Ronaldo side. So I've got it here, I'll show you. So there is the front facing there. And then because I wanted Ronaldo, I wanted to show that off at the time. That explains the picture. It's actually outside a KFC, which is still there to this day. So I assume, given the fact the picture's in that car park, I must have got a KFC that day, but I can't remember that for sure. But I can assure you, it's me showing off Ronaldo's name, nothing else.
I see. It just caught my eye when I was just flicking. I was flicking through your Twitter earlier. And I was like, I'll ask you about that. Ask, why not? Who is? So we'll kind of make this a twofold question, because someone I put on my Patreon that you were coming on today, and if any of the Patreons had any questions, they could send them in. Patreon.com/ACE Podcast Nation for people. so one of them asked, who is the biggest player that you've interviewed? And I was going to ask you actually, who is your favorite player, the favorite player that you've interviewed, so we can kind of combine the two, so you can answer Gaz's and kind of mine into one.
I think I would say favourite, obviously, being Henrik Larsson, just for the fact he gave me 70 minutes. He was my hero growing up. That's this Martin O'Neill team from 2000 to 2005 was the first Celtic team that I really got involved with and grew up watching. Went to his testimonial. It was a gift, funnily enough, from a neighbour in my street who they'd season tickets, and it was against Sofia, and I remember bawling my eyes out that night. There was an ABBA tribute act on before and at half-time of the game. Crazy. Just daft memories you have. So that team meant a lot to me, and he is always say it, the best. People talk Ronaldo, Messi, and these guys obviously are the greatest players ever, but my greatest player ever in my head, if you tell me, picture a footballer that's the greatest ever to you, Henrik's who comes to mind without even a moment's hesitation. So I would say him for my favourite because it just meant so much to me personally, even my family. My mum was, she couldn't believe it. My sister was incredibly jealous. She's 10 years older than me. So she was even more aware of that team and the team of the 90s with Wim Jansen that stopped 10 in a row. So I was only 3 when 10 in a row was stopped. So she always says, well, I wish it was me that interviewed him because I actually lived through that properly, blah, blah, blah. So I would say he was my favourite. In terms of highest name, I suppose I've been fortunate. I think it's hard to pick one. I think I've interviewed obviously Ron Atkinson, who was the manager of Manchester United, Wilf McGuinness, who's the oldest living Manchester United manager, obviously was a Busby babe, played with the likes of Duncan Edwards, Dennis Violet, and obviously Sir Bobby, George Best, etc. So you'd say the former United players in that sense. In terms of other names, I think, so again, United connection, Rennie Willenstein, who was Sir Alex's assistant when they last won the title. He could be another one. I've spoken to Graham Souness before. I've spoken to Harry Redknapp. And obviously other names up here. I don't know who I would pick out as being the most high profile. I think Larsson obviously won the European Cup, and there's been a couple others. Jim Craig, Lisbon Lion. Maybe I would mention Jim Craig. I think I would. I think I'd say he was a Lisbon Lion. He gave a penalty away in the game, which he had a good laugh about on the show. And I would say Jim Craig, just for the fact that I've spoken to a few other European Cup winners, but Jim Craig was part of the Lisbon Lions who won it within 30 miles of Glasgow. So, if I had to pick someone, I'd say Jim Craig.
Have you ever had like interviews where your guest was like difficult to get going, or to kind of like a bit what's the word, I suppose, just I guess a bit maybe a bit sheepish, maybe a bit shy, or maybe just a bit reluctant to give you too much? Have you ever had any sort of difficult guests?
I've been lucky that I would say only one comes to mind, and it was a player who was still playing the game and was in the process of a transfer potentially happening. And he didn't want to give too much away because obviously, like, who's the best player you played with? He didn't really want to answer it. Who's the best managers, coaches that have helped you? He didn't really want to answer it because he just wanted to not annoy anyone. He didn't want to see his current manager in case the future manager was saying, hold on a wee minute, and all that kind of thing. So only one, but I know the person well. And to be fair, they explained after it, look, maybe do this again in 6 months' time and I can be more open. So once, but it wasn't malicious. It was just the circumstance that they were in. And I understand that, because if you're moving from club to club, you don't want to rock the boat. You want to make sure everything goes through without a hitch. So only once, I would say.
Yeah, I think, and look, you can understand that in certain circumstances, can't you? There's sometimes people, there's things going on. They might just need, just a little bit of, if you interview them a week later, then it wouldn't be, as much of an issue with it. It's just that the timing, I guess, doesn't quite fall into to things like that. But yeah, it's also, I think I've been lucky. I was trying to think, because someone asked me the same question the other day, and I kind of thought about it, and I was like, nobody. I think everyone's been all right. Like, some people can be a bit shy and stuff like that. But once you start talking and you forget what you're doing and you're just chatting, then it kind of, it just moves on, and you kind of forget that you're recording. I think is the key. Once you get past that point, I think it's all right, isn't it? So as we finish now, where are you? So where are you now in terms of football writing and things like that? Obviously, you're doing BTP with Phil from the podcast side of things. What about the writing side of things?
So at the moment, World Football Index is my main publisher. Post normally 2 or 3 interviews with someone within the game, past or present. So World Football Index, the main publisher, also write for Over the Bar. Again, some interviews, normally quite niche interviews, go on there, and some opinion pieces. And in terms of the months to come, there's a few projects that are potentially on the horizon. I've got a chat tonight about probably the most exciting project I've ever going to have the chance to do, but I can't jinx it, unfortunately. But if it gets confirmed, then I'll let you know straight away. But there's a few things on the horizon that people have asked me to do, which again never thought would ever really happen. That people would phone me and say, "Look, your name's come up," blah blah blah. But take it as it comes, and as I say, you can get my work on World Football Index or Over the Bar and on Twitter @_ Callum McFadden. I changed it. I tried to get @Callum McFadden, but somebody that's not tweeted since 2012 has that handle.
There's nothing worse.
I'm gutted that I can't get it. But these things happen.
There's nothing worse, is there, though, when there's a Twitter handle that you want and the person who's got it hasn't used it for 20 years or something stupid. Yeah, it's frustrating because obviously previously you were Callum McFadden CFB or Callum CFB, weren't you?
Yeah.
So, I'll put links to like your new Twitter handle. I'll put links to BTP and I'll put links to the websites as well. So they're all in the description below. Callum, I got to say, mate, it's been an absolute pleasure. I really enjoyed having a chat to you. It's been really interesting. I just enjoyed it, to be honest. It's one of them which that sort of hour and 15 now nearly has just flown by. It's just flown by. Really appreciate it.
For me, it's just an absolute pleasure to be asked. I mean, you're talking about former England internationals and Keith Gillespie, again, a player who was fantastic in his career, and you've went from them to me. So I hope that it doesn't lose you too many viewers or listeners, but it means a lot to be asked. Genuinely, thank you so much.
No, not a problem at all. Guys, please do check out Callum's stuff and check out his podcast with Phil because it is very, very, very good. And you can check out all our previous videos and all the different interviews and shows, content, youtube.com/Ace Podcast Nation. And don't forget our more football content. Every Thursday, 7:30, we're live, the Rodri Gigs football show. And we have a lot of fun because Rodri does not beat around the bush. He gives very, very honest answers to every single question, which is always fun. But we'll be back next week for another episode of My Story. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.